There are different kinds of people. Each one of us are unique, not just physically, but also mentally, psychologically, emotionally. We have different kinds of views. Some people may see the world as full of colors, but others may view it as black and white. Hello, everybody. This is Shaina Mayamordi Isorena, and today let us talk about the first part of the Chapter 12 Personality Assessment Methods of the Psychological Testing and Assessment Ninth Edition book of Ronald J. Cohen and Mark E. Swerdick. So, in this chapter, we will be talking about the different personality assessment tools, which includes the projective methods of assessment and behavioral approaches to assessment. So, without further ado, let's get started. So the objective methods are usually administered by paper and pencil means or by computer means. The objective methods of personality assessment contains short answer items for which the assessee's task is to select only one response from the two or more choices that are provided on the test. In terms of scoring, it is done according to the set procedures that involves little, if there is any judgment of the part of the scorer. So the test may include items with multiple choice, true or false, or even matching format. So unlike the objective ability test, which is scored by determining if the answers of the test taker is correct or incorrect, the objective personality test is scored using a reference to either the personality characteristics being measured or the validity of the respondent's pattern of responses. So, for example, if you're going to answer a personality test, which the items are answerable by yes or no, or let's say true or false. So, the specific choices from that items may be already made as an indication of a presence or the absence of a particular trait. Or if the number of the items in which you answered yes or true may be used as a way of interpreting what traits or personality types do you have. So the objective personality test can be answered easily and quickly since it's just a short answer items and it's not a complicated task to answer. It can also be scored quickly and reliably from either manually scoring them or computer scoring them. And the analysis and interpretation is also as fast as the scoring, as fast as scoring the objective items. So why is it that the analysis and interpretation is very fast? Uh it's because each choices already has the reference on what kind of trait is present or absent on the test taker depending on the choice that the test taker made. So now how objective are objective methods of personality assessment? So unlike tests that are open-ended or essay tests, scoring the objective tests such as multiple choice of ability has no room for emotion, bias, or favoritism on the part of the test scorer. Furthermore, even if there are answers that the test taker should choose from, any choices is neither correct nor incorrect. Rather, when a test taker chooses an answer, that will be used to identify or acquire an information relevant to something about the test taker, such as the presence, the absence, or the strength of the personality related variable. However, it is also still an issue to use the adjective objective on a self-report test since the test taker would be choosing what they agree or disagree with, or what they do or do not do, and etc. But uh, the term objective was only used as a description for the format of the test, and it is also called objective because it only has short answers in a multiple choice format. And this gives little room for discretion when scoring. So it's objective in the part of the scorer because they don't have to make any judgment na. If there is any judgment, very little lang ang judgments na ma-make sa score. All the interpretations are already there depending on what kind of choice does the test taker chooses from the choices on the test, on the items of the test. So now, next up, we have projective methods. So when we say projective hypothesis, this is when an individual supplies structure to an unstructured stimuli in a manner which is consistent with the individual's own unique pattern of conscious and unconscious needs, fears, desires, impulses, conflicts, and ways of perceiving and responding. So, like this manner, we may define projective method as a technique of personality assessment in which some judgment of the assessee's personality is made on the basis of performance on a task which involves supplying some sort of structure in an unstructured or incomplete stimuli. So let's say for example, ang example sa book wherein in a classroom, in a very dark classroom, meaning off lahat ng lights, so pitch black lahat, walay makitaan, the teacher asked the students to stare at the board and then um think of what can they see on that board even though they cannot see anything, and then write it on a paper what they think they saw on the board. So some students may say that they saw their teacher standing right in front of the blackboard. Some would say that they saw a particular word written on the blackboard. Some would say that they saw something else on the blackboard because it um it involves the conscious and unconscious needs, fears, desires, impulses, conflicts, and ways of perceiving and responding. This is how they make their structure out on the unstructured or incomplete stimuli. Ang unstructured or incomplete stimuli here on this example is the blackboard which they cannot see, the chalkboard which the students cannot see. And the students were asked by the teacher to structure something out of that. So that is how the projective method works. So by using this kind of personality assessment, the assessor will not directly ask the assessee to disclose any information about themselves, but rather they will draw inferences about the personality of the assessee through the indirect responses that they give to the assessor. One example of projective method is, or one type of projective method is ink blot. So ink blots, the most famous ink blots is the Rorschach, which is proponent is si Hermann Rorschach. So Hermann Rorschach called this as a form of interpretation test using ink blots as the form to be interpreted. And on the year 1921, he then published his monograph on the technique psychodiagnostics, where at the last section of psychodiagnostics, he proposed the application of the Rorschach on personality assessment. By this, he showed 28 cases to support his test, and on the 28 cases, there were undiagnosed subjects with psychiatric diagnosis, which includes neurosis, psychosis, and manic depressive illness. Unfortunately, Herman Rorschach died at the age of 38, just a year after his book was published. And after all of that, Rorschach still got some criticisms about his test, and so there has been a bit of controversy about whether the instrument Rorschach created is best referred to as a test, a task, a method, a technique, or something else. So there are a lot of description or a lot of views on Rorschach, different views by different people. So for example, here we have Goldfried et al. 1971. He says that Rorschach is a structured interview. Korchin and Skoldberg 1981 says that Rorschach is less of a test and more of an open and flexible arena for studying interpersonal transactions. And John Exner, one of Rorschach's authority, once argued that the ink blots are not completely ambiguous, that the test does not necessarily force projection, and that unfortunately the Rorschach has been erroneously mislabeled as a projective test for far too long. Even if these criticisms were present, till now, Rorschach still remains virtually synonymous with projective test among the assessment professionals, and no matter how else referred to, no matter the criticisms that were given to the Rorschach ink blot test, it still certainly qualifies as a test. So the Rorschach contains 10 bilaterally symmetrical ink blots that are printed on separate cards. So bilaterally symmetrical sila because if you're going to make or the Rorschach ink blots were made by folding a paper in half, then using an ink to stain the paper and then unfolding it, you will see very symmetrical forms that were formed by the ink that was stained on the paper. On the 10 cards, 'di ba? 10 bilaterally symmetrical ink blots forms man ana as a card. I mean, there are 10 cards that has 10 bilaterally symmetrical ink blots. So one card, one ink blot. Sa 10 na yon, 5 of them are achromatic, meaning wala sila color or they are black and white. They're monochromatic, only black and white. Two are black, white, and red in color, and the remaining three are multicolored. So an example of multicolored is this one. The test comes with only cards, no manuals or administration, scoring, or even interpretation instructions on the test. So there will only be 10 cards lang sa test. So if unlike other tests, if you're going to order other tests, you will receive the test mismo, the administration, the scoring, or even the interpretation instructions of the test. But if you're going to order Rorschach inkblot test, you will only receive 10 cards in a cardboard box. And that's it. Wala siya wala administration, scoring, or even interpretation instructions. Mahulog siya na it's sold separately siya. There is no explanation on why some of the ink blots are colored and the others are achromatic. So wala jud siya explanation nganong ingana unsay significance sa achromatic sa significance sa kanang colors sa ink blots. Exner has this comprehensive system that is used in order to know how to administer, to score, and interpret the Rorschach. And this has been well received by the clinicians. And it is the single system that is mostly used and most taught today. Now, let us talk about the procedure of the Rorschach. So the ink blot cards will be presented to the test taker one at a time in a numbered order from 1 to 10. So number 1, the card number 1 will be shown first. Number 2 will be showed second. Number 3 will be showed third. And so on and so forth. Hantod sa mahurot ang cards. The test taker will have the freedom to say what they can see from the form of the ink blot rather. And by freedom, meaning there's no limits, there's no actual limits sa parts sa test taker. They can even rotate the picture, they can rotate the ink blot, they can do anything about it just to make a form out of it. So the examiner will record all the relevant information that the test taker give. So apil na dira ang unsa na posisyon ang ink blot tong time nag-interpret na siya sa examiner. Um, I mean, gi-interpret na siya sa test taker. So, what position was the ink blot? Giunsa siya pag-ingon sa test taker? What is the tone of the voice of the test taker when they interpreted the ink blot? What kind of emotion that did the test taker give while interpreting the ink blot, and so on and so forth. So all the relevant information will be listed. Then the examiner does not engage in any discussion concerning the test taker's responses during the initial administration on the cards. So the test taker has all of the freedom to talk about what they can see during the administration. Now, the inquiry follows wherein the examiner attempts to determine what features of the ink blot played a role in formulating the test taker's percept. Let's say, for example, a person was asked by the test taker what they can see on this ink blot, and the test taker would say that I can see a bird. Then and then klarohon na siya sa sa examiner. Asa dapit dira makit-an nimo ang bird. Nga mingon siya na kaning yellow na part sa ink blot kana naa sa pinaka right dapit sa right nako dapit makit-an nako na bird siyang porma ingana na siya. So then a third component of the administration referred to as testing the limits may also be included. So how is Rorschach scored? Rorschach is scored by a lot of factors: the location, the determinants, the content, popularity, and the form. The location is the part of the ink blot that was utilized in forming the percept. The determinants are the qualities of the ink blots that determine what the individual perceives. The content is the content category of the responses of the test taker. The popularity refers to the frequency with which a certain response has been found to correspond with a particular ink blot or section of an ink blot. And the form of a response is how accurately the individual's perception matches or fits the corresponding part of the ink blot. Now, pictures as projective stimuli. So, Christiana D. Morgan and Henry A. Murray both works at Harvard Psychological Clinic during the year 1935. So, both of them published the thematic apperception test or TAT. TAT na siya, dili na siya TAT. So the thematic apperception test is the most widely used instrument of all the picture storytelling projective tests. So picture storytelling projective test. So in this, the test taker will be shown a picture and will be asked by the examiner to form a story depending on the picture that are shown to them. So on the cards or in the pictures, some of them contains one individual, some contains a group of people, and some contains no people at all or blank lang iyahang card. Yes, naay blank na card sa TAT. And naa po na siya reason or naa na siya corresponding instruction on that particular card. So the drawings of these pictures can look realistic or surrealistic. So depende na siya. So naay drawings na realistic, naay po drawings na dili kay or medyo cartoony siya. So 20 cards is the recommended number for presentation. In practice, an examiner might administer as few as one or two cards or as many as all 31. Some of the cards are suggested for use with adult males, adult females, or both, and some are suggested for use with children. Many interpretive systems incorporate or are to some degree based on Henry Murray's conception of need, determinants of behavior arising from within the individual, press, determinants of behavior arising from within the environment, and thema, a unit of interaction between needs and press. So the TAT is also capable of yielding implicit motives. So implicit motive meaning a non-conscious influence on behavior typically acquired on the basis of experience. So let's say for example, kaning lalaki dati kay tig-adto dyan na siya sa bar. Tig-adto dyan na siya sa bar sa let's say mga rated 18 na bar. Tapos karon dili na siya tig-adto, na siya ay na siya asawa. And then the examiner would ask him, "Okay, tagai kog story na nag-lead ani na scene." And then tagaan because the pictures as projective stimuli kailangan man gud na siya na naa siya beginning, middle ug end kung unsay kalabasan sa story. So tagaan po dapat siya og kanang ending sa story unsay iyahang kalabasan. Mao to, ang test taker puwede siya mag-ingon og 'di ba, iyang kuan is nag-aadto siya dati sa rated 18 ng mga bar. Pero karon kay wala na naman siya asawa. Sana all 'di ba? Tapos, so this picture puwede siya maingon na, kana siya ng lalaki kay nana siya sa bar, since nakakita siya na duha ka buhok ang babae diri, kani ug kani. Tapos moingon siya na gitawagan na siya sa iyang asawa kay moingon na mouli na lagi daw kay kay gabii na. And stuff like that. So, gusto na siya mauli. Pero kaning babae here, this girl is stopping him from going home. Mingon siya na, ayaw, sag uli. Kadali lang gud. Dili lagi na mabantayan sa imong asawa, ana-ana na na siya. Tapos, ang kalabasan sa story, kalit lang nag-arrive iyang asawa tapos mao na to things escalated quickly and they had a huge fight and they got a divorce ingana na. So it is capable of yielding implicit motive since iyahang story kay murag basis siya sa experience niya. Naka-experience siya na kanang tig-adto siya sa sa rated 18 na mga bar dati and even though wala na siya nag-aadto karon naa siya asawa maring anak gud murag nag-derive iyang story from the things that he experienced. So ing ana na siya ang thematic apperception test. How to derive conclusions on the thematic apperception test or the TAT. So it depends on the stories that were told by the examinee. It depends on the clinician's notes about the way or the manner in which the examinees responded to the cards, kung sa ilang feelings, kung sa ilang emotions, so nag-respond sila sa cards. And it depends on the clinician's notes about the extra test behavior and verbalizations. There are several other pictures as projective stimuli na test. You can also check the book for the short description of these tests. So now we have the words as projective stimuli. So we have the word association test wherein si Francis Galton ang proponent ani niya. So in word association test, it's very easy. Ang task lang niya is moingon si examiner sa isa ka word and then iingon sa test taker ang word na mogawas dayon sa iyang huna-huna pagkadungog niya ato na word. The word association is a task that may be used in personality assessment in which an assessee verbalizes the first word that comes in mind in response to a stimulus word which is katong iingon sa examinee. So we have the sentence completion test pod. If ang word completion if ang word association test kay mag-ingon sila sa first word na magawa silang huna-huna after nila madunggan ang stimulus or word stimuli na na-receive nila, in the sentence completion test, they have to finish the sentence na gitagaan sila first words sa fast talk ni Boy Abunda in which isa dito murag ingadto pod ang thought tong giingon niya na tong si Catriona Gray and Boy Abunda tong giingon niya na I am Catriona Gray and onya gihuman siya ni Catriona I am Miss Universe Chuchines. Ingato na siya. Ingato ang sentence completion test. So Catriona completed the sentence na gihatag ni Boy Abunda ang first na mga words ato na sentence para i-complete ni Catriona. So another example of words as projective stimuli is the rather incomplete sentences blank. So the router incomplete sentences blank was developed for use with populations from grade 9 through adulthood and is available in three levels. High school, grades 9 through 12, college, grades 13 through 16, and adult. So each response is evaluated on a 7-point scale that ranges from need for therapy to extremely good adjustment. Same lang siya og thoughts sa akong example ganina. So you are given the first words of the sentence tapos ikaw na bahala mag-complete ato na sentence. Next, we have the sounds as projective stimuli. So one of the proponent here, the main proponent of this sounds as projective stimuli is very seldom lang siya ka permintin ni madungog sa katong behaviorism ng mga parts. We have B.F. Skinner. So Skinner um made a device that was something like auditory ink blots daw. So Skinner created a series of recorded sounds, much like muffled, spoken vowels, to which people would be instructed to associate. So the sounds packaged as a device which Skinner called the verbal semator. Tapos kaning verbal semator, rename to siya as the instrument na Tautophone siya. Tautophone na ang tawag niya. So, rename siya ni Saul Rosenwig and David Shackle. So, this tautophone presumably would act as a stimulus for the person to verbalize certain unconscious material from the sounds that was heard by the test taker. So, ang ginahatag nila na instructions sa subjects were as follows. So, here is a phonograph. On it is a record of a man's voice saying different things. He speaks rather unclearly, so I play over what he says a number of times. You'll have to listen carefully, and as soon as you have some idea of what he's saying, tell me once. So, kapila siya na times gibalik-balik. Very muffled manggod ni siya ang voice diri sa tautophone, it's muffled. So, dili kay siya masabtan. Pero ibalik-balik na siya play hantod sa kanang naanay ma-think ang subject kung sa ginaingon ato person. So, this is a picture of a tautophone. Dili kay siya klaro pero mao na ni ang picture na ako ang nakita from the internet. So my report ends there. Thank you very much for listening. And now I will give the floor to Miss Christine Hannah Bonotan.